I am delighted to welcome you to Art is Life, which is a chance to tour one of India's first ever digital museums and an astonishing opportunity to see the wonderful map collections before they open in actuality next year. I'm going to talk to you about the pre-modern collection today, and probably the best place to start talking about that would be to start with Vishnu Dharmatara from the 6th century, which begins with this wonderful and famous dialogue between a king and a sage. The king says he'd like to learn about the art of painting, and the sage replies, you cannot understand the art of painting unless you understand the art of dancing. And the king says, well, in that case, please tell me the rules of dancing. And the sage says, in order to understand the rules of dancing, you have first to understand the rules of music. So the king says, I'd like to learn the rules of music. Whereupon the sage says, but first, you need to learn the rules of singing, because without singing there could be no music, and so on. And the point of the story is that the arts of India are all integrated. They all relate to each other and refer to each other, and without holistically experiencing them all, you can't really understand them. And that, in a sense, is one of the points of the map collection. They've got an extraordinary and holistic collection from temple sculpture, chariots, Jain, Hindu, Mughal manuscripts. The whole of Indian art is here. And that, of course, is one of the great chief wonders of India. India is not, in fact, overly blessed with early political historical texts compared to, say, the Roman or the Chinese history, where you can get exact dates for events going back into many centuries AD. What you have in India, however, is an incredible richness of the arts from the very earliest periods. And it's this that MAP celebrates. We all know from experience of wandering around government or ASI site museums how badly displayed so much of Indian art and culture is. Those dusty museums that feel so unloved, with very minimal and very sort of overly scholarly and terse signage, with badly lit, often with a single naked light bulb or a single strip light. Now, against that, you have a growing number of private museums that are turning things around. I'm thinking of the wonderful Mehranga Fort Museum in Jodhpur, or the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum in Mumbai, which is run by a private trust. And that's going to be the case with MAP. But MAP will be the crown jewel of these. It will have a truly astonishing collection that is being augmented every month. This now is your opportunity to tour that collection digitally for the first time. Don't hesitate to seize the chance.
Thank you for that introduction, William. I am now delighted to be presenting a few special highlights from MAP's pre-modern art collection, which houses some of the most canonical works and classical traditions of Indian art. The works it features are often products of two significant and sometimes overlapping contexts of patronage: royalty and religion. No matter the context, though, they form a rich repository of stories, historical and mythical, real and imagined. Human beings are natural storytellers. From the earliest cave paintings, storytelling has been an integral part of our lives, in all cultures, over all eras, and in all parts of the world. Even before we had text, we had poetry, legend, lore, and myth. Depicting the oldest form of sharing stories that we have, oral transmission, is this folio from an illustrated Bhagavad Puran. The Bhagavad Puran is a sacred Hindu text, one of the 18 great Puranas, and the left half of this painting is entirely devoted to establishing its preeminence. In a royal setting, at the center sits the Srimad Bhagavat, on a golden throne studded with precious stones and topped with a royal chhatra or parasol. On this seat of honor sits the Srimad Bhagavat, like a sovereign presiding over a sabha of courtiers, the other 17 Puranas, each separately named. On the right register, the focus is on how this celebrated text was transmitted across space and time by Vishnu himself, who instructs Brahma, Brahma, who in turn conveys it to the divine sage Narada, and onwards from Narada to Vyasa, Vyasa to his son Shukadev, lastly Shukadev to the king Parikshit, throned as heir to the Pandavas in Hastinapur. And additionally, one may reflect, with the passing of the ages, eventually from the manuscript to the reader, the artist's saligram to us. From the same series produced in a Jaipur workshop is this painting from the 10th chapter of the Purana that details stories from Krishna's early life, his childhood and youth in Vrindavan. In this episode, rarely illustrated, the gopis are looking for Krishna who is missing. Their intense love and devotion for him drives them to madness in his absence, and they begin asking the plants, trees, and creepers around them if they have seen him. In this enigmatic portrayal, 7 groups of gopis are depicted besides 7 kinds of plants, eagerly seeking news of Krishna and the name of each plant inscribed on the side. At first glance, they seem somewhat identical, as if the painter had but traced the group over and over. Yet when one looks closely, the work highlights the true wonder of miniature paintings, their extraordinary detailing. Countless minor variations may be observed in the renderings of the individual gopis, from the single curls that escape their veils, the ghagras and earrings that adorn them, to their elegantly rendered faces, in particular their eyes. The representation of love, devotional, erotic, or romantic, could in many ways be considered the central theme of Rajput miniatures. This 18th century painting from Bundi portrays the romance of Soni and Mahiwal. A popular subject since the late Mughal period, numerous paintings from several courts throughout northern India illustrated this Punjabi tale of ill-fated love. And many of them shared a common iconography, also reflected in this painting. A landscape with the figure of Soni crossing the river on an overturned earthenware pot to visit Mahiwal, who is shown seated on the far bank tending his buffaloes. Usually present is also the figure of an ascetic seated near a cave or hut and smoking a water pipe. According to the legend, Mirza Izzat Beg, the son of a wealthy merchant ruler in Turkestan, travelled to India during the reign of the Mughal emperor Shah Jahan. On his journey back home, his caravan stopped to camp by the river Chenab in Punjab. There he encountered and fell in love with a potter's daughter named Soni. He spent a fortune on pots for her, gave up all plans of leaving, and took on jobs for her father, including the tending of their buffaloes, earning him the name Mahiwal, or he who tends buffaloes. Although she was forced to marry someone else, they began to meet secretly at night, with Soni using a large pot as a float to swim across the river. Discovering this, Soni's sister-in-law replaced her pot with an unfired one. As the pot dissolved midstream, Soni began to drown. In the nature of tragic love stories everywhere, Mahiwal, leaping in after her, also drowned, and the lovers were united in death. Although the composition of this painting is typical of the theme, it deviates in its depiction of Mahiwal, who is haloed and blue-skinned, transformed into the ideal lover, Krishna. This change signifies a new cultural and spiritual relevance and is emphasized by the grazing cattle, with the conventional buffaloes replaced here by Krishna's sacred cows. Bundi Kota painters are known for their sensitive portrayal of flora and fauna, and this painting is an excellent example of the same. Several birds, including peacocks and cranes, many in pairs, can also be observed, serving perhaps as metaphors of love. If on the one hand, it is possible to observe the commonalities in different depictions of a story, as in the case of Soni Mahiwal paintings, classical Indian art also provides ample fodder for widely varied representations of the same narrative. Seen here, for instance, is the figure of Ugra Narasimha. Narasimha is one of the Dashavatar, or 10 primary incarnations of Vishnu, in which he assumes the form of a part man, part lion. In this early stone sculpture, he is seen in his terrifying or Ugra aspect. As the story goes, Hiranyakashipu, the demon king, secured a blessing from Brahma that he may not be killed by man nor woman, demigod nor beast, neither in the day nor at night, neither inside nor outside, neither with weapons nor bare hands, and neither in the sky nor above ground. Although different texts offer variations on the specific clauses, the boon is always one of near invincibility. Infuriated by his son Prahlad's devotion to Vishnu, he makes several unsuccessful attempts to kill him. When Prahlad continues to refuse to acknowledge his superiority, Hiranyakashipu challenges him, asking if his omnipresent god might be in a pillar. As dusk descends, to his surprise, Narasimha splits the pillar open and emerges. This painting from central India presents a conventional composition, Narasimha slaying Hiranyakashipu on his lap with his sharp nails. He is flanked by Prahlad on one side and his mother on the other, both with their hands folded in respect. In this Pahari painting from the hill kingdoms of the Himalayan foothills, however, we see a unique rendition of Narasimha, not as man-lion, but appearing completely as a vividly striped tiger. The bulky muscular body, large fangs, and lolling tongue present his grotesque and fierce aspects. The dead Hiranyakashipu lies on his lap, blood graphically oozing from him to collect on some steps below. He is flanked again by two figures, who might be Prahlad and his mother, though the male figure appears uncommonly older, and the female figure is dressed in a peshwaz commonly seen in Pahari paintings. In an 18th century wooden chariot panel from Karnataka in the south, we see a still different representation. This carved panel would have once been part of a ceremonial chariot used during temple and festival processions. In this sculpture, instead of choosing to present the customary defining moment, the artist shows a four-armed Narasimha attacking Hiranyakashipu, the two of them locked, two limbs entirely intertwined, mid-tussle. The story of the Narasimha avatar appears in several texts, including the Bhagavad Puran. And the Jaipur series that we looked at first also features an illustration of the same, although this scene is set after the climactic death of the Asura. A great force and energy is brought to this depiction of Narasimha with his multiple arms, each with their razored claws, his vibrantly yellow skin, round widened eyes, and a fiery mane that flames outwards, bound only by his halo. To add to his ferocious appearance, he is shown wearing the blood-filled veins of the dead Hiranyakashipu as a garland, something rarely depicted. Here we see how even after killing Hiranyakashipu, Narasimha remains enraged. At Brahma's request, Prahlad seeks to pacify him with several prayers. Apart from the tiny young Prahlad and Brahma, also present are Shiva, Lakshmi, and a group of sages standing in respect. Although this part of the story is clearly its central focus, the painting does present a broader picture. On the left, we see Vishnu, still as Narasimha, though now calmed, retiring back to his abode accompanied by his consort Lakshmi. While outside the palace on the upper right, Prahlad performs the final rites of his father, burning his body as other asuras pay their respects. This playful and flexible approach to the understanding and depiction of time and space is a key element of Indian painting. Underlining this aspect, an allusion is made again to the transmission of the story, and on the top left, we see the narrator sage Narada conversing with Yudhishthir. And so we come full circle. It is a truth universally acknowledged that everyone loves a good story. Faith, hope, love, history. Our stories make them all come alive. I'm pleased to introduce next Madhu Nataraj, Director of STEM Dance Kampni and the Natya Institute of Kathak and Choreography, who will be presenting a special performance along with her troupe. We'd like to thank them all for taking the time to choreograph this piece in response to two paintings from MAP's pre-modern art collections. One that depicts the gopis searching for a missing Krishna, and one of a Nayika, drawing from the tradition of the Ashtanayikas, or 8 types and states of a romantic heroine.
Greetings, Namaskar. In this Covidian Kal, the arts have offered the world a space for reflection, respite, and dialoguing. As an artist, I have felt the need to reboot, realign my intent, recalibrate, and reinvent. And all of us have embraced this virtual space and looked at more cross-illumination between the arts. And therefore, it was a delight when MAP asked us to respond to a certain genre of paintings. It seemed apt to respond to the Rajasthani miniature art we were offered with Kathak. Kathak brings together the Hindu and Islamic ideology in thought, design, and of course the physicality. And miniature paintings also have this merging and collision of so many influences, whether it's Kangra, it's Mughal, Rajasthani. So the two paintings had one undercurrent in common, and that was waiting. And somehow it seemed very apt, this component in our lives of waiting, as we all are together in this pandemic generated endless wait. Some of us are waiting to see what happens, what is going to happen at the other end of the pandemic. And therefore this piece is called Naika, embodying love in waiting. The piece begins with the concept of Shringar as the Naika, the quintessential heroine, dresses herself in weight of union. There's a beautiful concept that my guru, Dr. Mayra, would always talk about. She said, how is it possible for there to be union unless you experience separation, sanjog and viyog? And this lends itself to a beautiful Ashtapadi, again a song of love from the 12th century, from the Geet Govind. And also you see motifs of a Thumri, Apke Savan Ghar Aa, again the Virohit Khantita Naika who waits for her lover. And this whole montage is about the possibility of union, the definiteness of separation, and ownership over one's body, thought, and art. The two paintings we were offered had a woman admiring herself as she adorns herself, and the second had the gopis standing on top of treetops, talking to flora and fauna, asking when they would meet Krishna, who embodies love, or when they would get a sight of him. Is he going to come back? And this beautiful interaction with nature that you see in these genre of paintings, the miniature art, we also find as a quintessential aspect of Indian classical dance. And so we found this connection between nature, seasons, and the second Thumri that you hear is about the monsoon. It's about sending a message with the crow. It is about the elements passing the message of love, the possibility of meeting. In becoming one with him, I lose my senses. I forget. Sanjog, Viyog, union and separation. One is possible because the other is. Nature, the seasons, become powerful propellers of the passionate state of lovers. The haunting sound of Krishna's flute is a call towards a higher state and also heightens the period of separation. The Virohit Kantita Naika waits for her lover. Will they meet? Maybe. Maybe not. Sanjog, Viyog. If remembering Hari enriches your heart, if his acts of seduction arouse you, listen. When spring came, tender-limbed Radha wandered like a flowering creeper in the forest wilderness, seeking Krishna in his many haunts. The god of love increased her ordeal, tormenting her with fevered thoughts. Her friends sang to heighten the mood.
Linking collections around the world, Museum Without Borders is a unique digital collaboration between MAP and institutions in India and abroad. Each episode in this series juxtaposes an artwork from MAP with an object from a partner museum, exploring commonalities and differences in style, subject, or narrative. In a time of restricted mobility, this initiative helps to build bridges between people, collections, and institutions. MAP's collaboration with the Detroit Institute of Arts features two goddesses from South India, a Brahmani in MAP's collection and a Yogini currently housed at the DIA. This video outlines the historical underpinnings of the sculptures, where they likely originated from, and how they made their way into museums in India and abroad. Exploring both similarities and differences in their composition and histories, Catherine Kastorf, curator at the DIA, examines how both goddesses embody facets of Ugra and Saumya, the fierce and the gentle.
Hello, my name is Catherine Kastorf and I'm Associate Curator of Arts of Asia and the Islamic World at the Detroit Institute of Arts. I'm thrilled to be collaborating with the Museum of Art and Photography in Bengaluru on their Museums Without Borders series. In this edition, we bring two South Asian goddess sculptures into dialogue with one another. One, in the collection of MAP, depicts the goddess Brahmani. The other, which now resides at the DIA, is a type of goddess known as the Yogini. These two goddesses may have their share of differences. Most noticeably, the Yogini appears ferocious and threatening, whereas the Brahmani looks more serene. But as we'll see, they also have a few things in common. Both sculptures date to about the 10th century, or possibly the late 9th, and they come from different parts of southern India. The Yogini was carved in the northern part of Tamil Nadu, when that region was in a transitional moment between the Pallava and Chola periods. The Brahmani comes from southern Karnataka, most likely in a region ruled by the Nolamba dynasty, though political borders were similarly fluid there. Expertly chiseled in stone, an expensive medium, both sculptures must have cost their patrons a significant sum. These patrons may have belonged to royal families, or they could have been other elite individuals, such as members of a court or wealthy merchants. The sculptures were carved on different scales. The Yogini, with her curved backdrop rising up 117 centimeters or 46 inches, is human-sized, while the Brahmani is 70 centimeters or 27.5 inches tall. The artists who made them paid great attention to detail, chiseling each element of the goddess's jewelry and even individual strands of hair. Looking at the sculptures side by side, a few similarities are immediately apparent. The goddesses are seated in similar positions, although the Yogini crosses her feet and sways, while the Brahmani sits upright. Both goddesses have 4 arms, though one of the Yoginis is now missing, and their curvaceous bodies, decked with bracelets, necklaces, and other jewelry, are informed by similar conventions pertaining to ideals of female beauty and the importance of adornment in South Asian visual culture historically. But the Yogini is adorned with more than just jewelry. Where we would expect to see armlets and a sacred thread, live snakes wind their way around her body, rearing their hooded heads. These snakes are one of many features that signal the Yogini's fierce or Ugra character. She also fixes her face in a menacing expression, staring out under her bulging eyes, an intensely furrowed brow, and opening her mouth to bare teeth and fangs. Her unbound hair radiates around her head with a wild energy. The cup she holds in her lower left hand is understood to be made from a human skull, and she sits above a headless corpse which is carved into low relief on her pedestal. In her upper hands, she holds a shield and a club, martial objects that can be used both to harm and to protect, as the scholar Padma Kaimal has pointed out. Drawing attention to the twofold nature of these weapons, Kaimal also makes the larger point about the character of Yoginis themselves. they embody both auspicious and inauspicious qualities, dismantling binaries at every turn. Yoginis, as their iconography suggests, are extremely powerful. As goddesses associated with tantric traditions, their power is in part connected to their overturning of orthodox norms and their embracing of what is commonly considered impure. Objects like the skull bowl this yogini holds, or the corpse she sits upon. They guard tantric teachings from the uninitiated, restricting the powerful knowledge of these traditions to the initiated few. To individuals who hold this knowledge and who correctly perform the arduous practices it demands, yoginis may grant great powers, even supernatural powers such as the ability to fly, the ability to become very large or very small, victory over one's enemies, and other magical abilities. But to individuals who do not follow their practices correctly, a yogini can be lethal. A yogini does not act alone, however. They always occur in groups. Most commonly, texts refer to groups of 64 yoginis, though they may occur in other numbers too. Imagine this goddess, then, accompanied by potentially dozens of others like her, all enshrined together. Although the temple for which they were carved no longer survives, other yogini temples do, especially in the states of Odisha and Madhya Pradesh. These temples are usually circular in form, though some are rectangular, and the dozens of powerful goddesses they house are enshrined around the inner periphery of the structure, facing inward. Often, a fierce form of the god Shiva is enshrined at the center. The temples are open to the sky, a feature that scholars such as Shaman Hatley connect with the yogini's ability to fly.
The Yogini sculpture that is now at the DIA is one of several that were found together in the region of Kanchipuram, Tamil Nadu in 1926 by the French archaeologist Gabriel Dubreuil and his Indian associate Thangavelu. We know that the sculptures were no longer in their original temple at this time. Indeed, no trace of that temple is known to exist. The exact context in which they were found and just how Thangavelu and Juvo Dubreuil negotiated their acquisition are matters that are not entirely clear. These questions are the subject of ongoing research. In the late 1920s, Juvo Dubreuil sold 16 sculptures, including 10 yoginis, to the Paris-based art dealer C.T. Liu, and in the ensuing decades, they entered various collections across Europe and North America. One of the yogini sculptures remains at the Government Museum in Chennai.
Around the same time that Thangavelu and Juvo Dubreuil collected the yoginis, they also collected a number of other sculptures. One of these, now housed at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, is a Brahmani sculpture very similar in size to the one in Map's collection. Brahmani, as her name suggests, is related to the god Brahma, and they share many of the same attributes. Most distinctively, Brahmani has 4 heads like Brahma, although only 3 are carved in the Map and AAM sculptures. She also holds a rosary or akshamala and a water pot or kamandalu. We see those 2 objects in her 2 upper hands. The Map Brahmani holds her lower right hand in the gesture of protection and reassurance, Abhaya Mudra. The object she holds in her lower left hand is worn and not fully identifiable. Perhaps it was meant to represent a lotus pod. The hand that holds it makes the gesture of generosity, Varada Mudra, the same gesture that the Asian Art Museum Brahmani makes with her lower left hand. Brahmani belongs to a group of 7 or sometimes 8 goddesses known as Matakas, or mothers. They're not mothers in a conventional sense, although one of their origin stories positions them collectively as mother of the god Skanda. In another origin story, they arise to help the supreme goddess Devi in her fight against the demons Shumba and Nishumba. Many of the Matrikas, including Brahmani, are female counterparts of male gods and share many of those gods' attributes. For instance, Vaishnavi relates to Vishnu, Aindri to Indra, Maheshwari to Maheshwara or Shiva, and the boar-faced Varahi to Vishnu's boar incarnation, Varaha. They are not seen as consorts or components of these gods, however, but as aspects of Devi, the great goddess. Despite the tame appearance of Brahmani and many of the other Matrikas, though not all of the Matrikas, the skull-bearing emaciated Chamunda is also part of the group, Matrikas have a fierce side. In Puranic traditions, they defeat demons on the battlefield and then drink their blood. In earlier traditions, they're even fiercer and more dangerous. This blending of Ugra and Saumya, ferocious and gentle, is similar to the combination of threatening and alluring qualities we see in the Yogini. In fact, Yoginis and Matrikas are closely related. Early texts about Yoginis describe them as belonging to clans led by Matrikas, and some Yogini temples enshrine Matrikas too. More commonly, however, shrines to Matrikas are associated with temples to the god Shiva, and this is the most likely context for which the map Brahmani was carved. Usually, Matrikas are placed in the southwestern area of a Shiva temple, whether in their own separate shrine or along the plinth in the main hall of the temple. We aren't sure where all of this Brahmani's companion Matrikas are now, but much like Yoginis, they would have manifested their power, their Shakti, collectively. Today, in Bengaluru, in Detroit, and elsewhere, these goddesses, even on their own, still project an unmistakable power. Thank you.
And now, a final word from our patrons, whose support and guidance have been integral to MAP's journey.
City has had a long-standing commitment to arts and culture globally. In India as well, we've been promoting India's cultural identity for over 25 years. We've had some significant partnerships with the likes of NCPA and the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya in Mumbai, and we're very proud of our association with them in promoting art and culture. So when the idea of the Museum of Art and Photography came up, and very ably headed by Abhishek Padar and his team, City was one of the founding patrons, and we were very proud to get on board in promoting the vision which Abhishek had put out for MAP. Like everyone else, MAP's plans on the physical rollout of the museum was obviously impacted by COVID. But I think what's been particularly impressive of Abhishek and his wonderful team has been the very agile and quick pivot which they made to the digital and online dissemination of their vision, and which would frankly unleash and disseminate the art and culture to the Indian masses in a manner which a physical world is never capable of doing. And I think that's in a way a real plus of what's come out of the COVID situation. What's also very impressive is the number of global collaborations and tie-ups MAP has been able to do through this period, which gives a lot of Indians access to world-class art and cultural pieces, which in a normal course would not easily be available. They've also been very active on the social media during the lockdown period, which obviously grows the online community of followers, a lot more support coming in, I believe, from the donor community as well. So I think it's been very impressive how prolific they've managed to be through the lockdown and through the whole COVID situation. So I think from our perspective at City, we're very proud of our association with MAP. I think we wish them the best in their journey, and I'm sure it's going to be a very successful execution of what clearly was a wonderful vision set out by Abhishek. Thank you.
It's Saskin Foundation's honor and privilege to be associated with MAP. Our journey started around the time Abhishek had formed his vision, which I believe was around 4 to 5 years ago. It was very hard not to be captivated by the vision and dream Abhishek had. One, because Abhishek is captivating. However, when I see how the vision has unfolded over the last many a year and try to compare with what one had in mind then, it far exceeds what one had bargained for. The obvious question that would come to one's mind is why support an initiative like MAP? The obvious answer that comes to me today also, which I believe came to me then, we as a nation need many world-class museums, and why not start with Bangalore, a world-class city? We have many museums in the city, and this will indeed be one more feather in the cap. When we do travel the world, the most obvious places one visits is a museum. Traditionally, they house the history, both local and of the world. Why would we, as Saskin Foundation, miss an opportunity to support the creation of one such institution which was being dreamt of from grounds up? The obvious answer came in the form of MAP. I leave it to your imagination, which is the cart and which is the horse. Today, indeed, a memorable day for all of us when MAP is formally being launched, that too in a novel, virtual manner. I understand history is being created live, whereby a large number of people are present for the opening ceremony. I would like to see MAP thrive and take this vision to many places across India so that the minds can be opened to the world of art, particularly the younger minds. It does help create a more balanced perspective when one is exposed to the world of art, thereby creating a more tolerant society. I wish all the success to MAP on this path of excellence, and we look forward to our continued support. Thank you.